Section 49 of the Soul, or Rational Psychology. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Soul, or Rational Psychology, by Emanuel Swedenborg. Translated by Frank Sewall, 1837 to 1915, and others. Section 49. Chapter 32. The Universal Mathesis, or a Mathematical Philosophy of Universals. 562. The celebrated Locke, in his treatise on the human understanding, says, quote, "The ideas which form the basis of morality being all real essences, and of such a nature that they sustain a mutual connection and adaptation which may be discovered, it follows that as soon as we discover these relations, we shall to that point be in possession of so many real, certain, and general truths. And I am sure that in following a good method, one might bring a large part of moral science to such a degree of evidence and certitude, that an attentive and judicious man would no longer find in it any matter of doubt, more than he would in propositions of mathematics which have been demonstrated to him." End quote. Book 4, Chapter 12, Section 8. And elsewhere, quote, "Perhaps if one should consider distinctly and with all possible care the kind of science which proceeds upon the basis of ideas and words, this would produce a logic and a critique different from those hitherto seen." End quote. Book 4, Chapter 21, Section 4. Again, quote, "I do not doubt that in the state and present constitution of our nature, human knowledge may be carried far beyond any point thus far attained, if men will undertake sincerely and with entire mental freedom to perfect the means of discovering the truth with the same application and the same industry which they employ in coloring and maintaining a falsity, in defending a system of which they are declared partisans, or certain interests in which they are engaged." End quote. Book 4, Chapter 3, Section 6. Further, quote, "The highest degree of our knowledge is intuition without reasoning, for this is certain knowledge, secure from all doubt, having no need of proof, and incapable of receiving it, because it is the highest point of all human certitude. Such is that which the angels now possess, and that which the spirits of the just, made perfect, will attain to in the life to come. It embraces 1,000 things which at present escape entirely our understanding, our reason in its limited range of vision catching few gleams of them, the rest remaining veiled in darkness from our view." End quote. Book 4, Chapter 17, Section 14. 563. There is given a science of sciences, or a universal science, which contains all others in itself, and parts of which can, as it were, be resolved into these and those particular sciences. Such a science is not acquired by learning, but it is connate, especially in souls which are pure intelligences. Such is the science of souls released from the body, and of angels, who, if they communicate their thoughts or converse, would seem unable to form any connection by words, which are all material ideas and forms, and which the mind understands as signs, knowing their meaning, and this from experience. But the soul, from this its science, contemplates all objects immediately as they are in themselves, thus whether good or evil, and according to their nature it assents or is averse. Unless the soul were furnished with such a science, it would be wholly unable to flow into our thoughts, and to infuse, as it were, the power of understanding and of expressing higher things. as also it would be unable to adapt all its organic forms to the inmost and most secret laws of mechanics, physics, chemistry, and many other phenomena. Therefore, that such a science exists, there can be no doubt. 564. For there are truths a priori, or propositions which are at once acknowledged as true, nor is there need for any demonstration a posteriori for proving them, nor of confirmation by experience, or by the senses. The truth itself presents itself naked, and as it were declares itself true. The mind is often indignant that such truths should have to be proved, when they are above all demonstration. For all harmonies, and thus all order, naturally soothe and delight the organs of our senses, while disharmony constrains and wounds them. So it is with truths, in which there is, as it were, an intellectual order. Wherefore, if we were not overburdened with the fetters of sciences, with the turbulent desires of the lower mind, and similar hindrances, we should be able to know truths purely, since a certain consent shines forth as something harmonious, and as from a sacred shrine, I know not where. 565. But the reason for this is that higher forms contain in themselves all those things which can be contained in the lower forms, as the universal genus contains all the species, so that the higher form is the order itself and the principle of the following forms, thence also of all other forms, modes, and qualities. And in themselves, as of their very nature, they perceive whatever agrees or disagrees with the form, and thence all that ever is given in the lower forms, if there is a connection therewith, such as that of the soul with the body, by means of the organic forms. 566. This science indeed may seem to be capable of being reduced to rule, but by what mode of reasoning can be perceived from those things which are immediately around the internal sensory? Thus all ideas, both material and intellectual, are only mutations of the state of the sensory and of the intellectory. And these changes of state can be understood from a description of the forms, especially the circular and spiral. The soul perceives every such change, and knows what it signifies. The changes of state are universal and singular, common and particular, general, special, and individual, and all these can be subjected to a certain algebraic calculation, and be reduced by rules to equations in the same manner as is customary in the calculus of infinites. In the mind itself also all things are reduced to their equations, in which those things are together present, which before have been collected, or have taken place successively. Those things which are in contact with the internal sensory can be raised to higher powers, or elevated to higher degrees by their proper rules, and so changes of state still more universal exist, which contain together and successively infinitely more particulars corresponding to the truths themselves perceived by the soul from the changes of state. 567. Thus, indeed, it is possible to submit ideas of the mind to calculation, whence arises the universal Mathesis. But it is not possible to deduce any certitude thence, unless there be a certitude proposed and acknowledged, from which equations are to be commenced. I would wish also to propose one other attempt. Indeed, I have ascertained its possibility, but there are many rules to be premised, and data proposed, and truths to be adjusted, before I may approach this. And still we fall at length into a great Gordian knot and equation, out of which greater labor is required to extricate ourselves than it is worth while to devote to it. And from the smallest fault in reckoning we are able to fall into many fallacies. On this account I forbear making the attempt, and in place of it I have desired to propose a certain key of natural and spiritual mysteries by the way of correspondences and representations, which more directly and certainly leads us into hidden truths. And upon this doctrine, since it is as yet unknown to the world, I ought to dwell at somewhat greater length. Section 49.